Gosh, it's great to be here, and I'll say that I really love coming to these Creative Mornings. Mike had told me about them, and a little bit of it might have been research to kind of see what was going on at the first one. But after that, it was like a magnet for me. I just wanted to be here. So every last Friday when I'm here. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of a story. There was a few years back an actor, comedian, and he was not very well known at the time. Now, if I say his name right now, probably everyone in here will recognize it, Adam Sandler. But this was before he was famous, before his first big movie and such. And he said he was in a little pizza parlor up in New Hampshire. It was round tables, not many people in there, and there was a teenager waiting on him. And he was with his family there and kids, and the teenager walked over and said, "Man, you look like Adam Sandler." And he looked up and he said, "I know." "So, what's your name?" "Adam Sandler." And the teenager said, "Whoa, now that's a coincidence." But I like to think that it is no coincidence that we're gathered here telling stories and listening to stories. This is something that we humans have always done. I feel like it's in our DNA. And this goes back not just hundreds of years, but thousands and thousands of years. And so do taboos. Uh-oh, there it is. That sound come back? Those taboos also go back hundreds and thousands of years. Our lives have been shaped in many ways by the taboos we experience, sometimes from religions, from our society, from our families. These taboos have a huge impact on our lives. Now, some taboos are really helpful. You know, the taboo against stealing a friend's wallet or walking into a house uninvited, a stranger's house in the middle of the night. Those are good taboos to have. But there are a lot of taboos that really limit us. They kind of tell us who we can be and who we can't be. They limit our choices. Now, it might be that you have different ideas about taboos, but for today, I'm going to invite you to kind of walk along with my look at taboos as untrue stories. Now, I might mention I'm a professional storyteller. This has been my only for real job as an adult. I waitressed in college and such, but I've been able to make my living this way for many years. And in a performance, I might tell a story that comes from the Appalachians here, a traditional story, or maybe one about my own true life experiences. If there are a lot of teenagers in the audience, I might tell a really intense, scary story that dates back to the Middle Ages. Some stories are funny, some stories are tender, but there's one thread that runs through all the stories that I tell, and that is a sense of truth. I'm always looking for what holds truth for me. But here is the paradox in my life. A lot of the stories that I tell myself are not true. They seem to be true. I take them as fact, but they are not. So let me tell you about one of the untrue stories that I uncovered about 7 years ago. Since I was a child, I'd always told myself I was not athletic, I was not physical, I was not fit. You know, back when I was in school, where I went to school, they didn't even have any kind of sports teams. And if anything, there was a taboo against being physically fit. You know, girls were supposed to have, they're supposed to be very feminine and petite and pretty and certainly not have muscles. And you better not sweat. Now, as I started growing into young adulthood, some of those taboos started shifting a little bit. And then they got all rolled up in body image, especially for females. This whole thing about not being whatever society decided was the perfect body, and not approaching that in the perfect way that society said to approach it. Now, I came under that spell of those taboos. And I always struggled most of my life with feeling overweight and out of shape. I would, look at other people and compare myself and think, I'm just not measuring up. And I feel like society was really dictating to me what I should look like, how I should be. Now, I didn't know it at the time, and certainly society still continues to do that. But countless times I would declare, I need to lose weight. I need to get in shape. I need to start exercising. And the pattern was I would buy some piece of equipment. It might be a treadmill or stretchy bands. A few of you might remember those Jane Fonda exercise videos. I'd get all the right clothes, the perfect shoes, and I would go at it. I'd be faithful on that treadmill every single day for a week, maybe even a month. And then something would happen. My knee would start hurting, or I'd be traveling and telling stories and I'd miss a few classes. Or I just didn't feel like doing it. Days would pass, months would pass, years would sometimes pass. And then I would come back around to, I need to lose weight. I need to exercise. So my story was, I am not athletic, I am not physical, I'm not strong. Now, if we were talking emotionally or spiritually, mentally strong, you bet. But the body, not so much. And I had just accepted that as truth. And my life reflected that. Now, my husband, he has been fit and drawn towards exercise and keeping in shape. He's been the athlete in our family for the 36 years that we've been together. He's always working out or riding his bike up one of the mountains around here and pedaling, not that kind that's electric. And he plays racquetball and golf, and he's always seeking out new challenges. Well, one of those new challenges, a challenge came about 7 years ago. He was reading a newspaper article in our local newspaper, and there was a story about a man named Corey Duvall. He is a coach and a sports chiropractor. Well, Corey and his partner were opening up a new gym. And something just really intrigued Phil about this. And he decided to sign up for what was called an Onramp class for 8 weeks. Well, the first night that he came home, he was practically clawing his way up our stairs, wiped out, and he had this big old smile on his face. He was loving it. Well, after about 2 weeks of him telling me about these intense, grueling workouts, he asked me to come and watch one of the classes. It was a winter day. It was in the evening, already dark. Walked into the gym and it was kind of dark too, and small. No machines. There were barbells and weights around the edges. Some jump ropes hanging from hooks and such. And there were 10 or 12 enthusiastic men and women ready to go at it. Now the space was so small where they were working out. I actually had to walk up a few steps to a loft to watch. And I remember this sea of moaning and groaning and sweat. And at the same time, they seemed to be in this place of bliss. It seemed like such an odd combination. And I distinctly remember thinking, I would never do this. Well, 2 days later, Phil said, how would you like as a Christmas present 10 sessions working one-on-one with my coach? For some weird, miraculous reason, I like to think of it as a gift of grace, I said yes. Now, an old pattern would have been to say, well, honey, that's really sweet of you. Let me think about it. And I'd go away and I'd make my list. All the pros and all the cons. And on this side over here, I probably should. I'd probably lose weight. Oh, I guess, I don't know. And over here, that list was much longer. I won't like it. I'll have to sweat. It won't be any fun. I'll probably hurt myself. It'll be too hard. It'll take too much time. But for some reason, this time, I said yes. And it was the start of a new story for me. I didn't know it at the time. Since then, for 7 years, I've been working out 2 times minimum, often 3 times a week. And I'm there grunting and groaning and sweating with a big old smile on my face. And I found that it impacts my life in many ways. You know, when wasn't too long ago, I was walking up a mountain and taking a hike, and I didn't have to stop and rest and catch my breath even once. And with all my one-arm farmer carries, my suitcase is okay. And if I see a stage in front of me, maybe I'm doing a sound check, there's a stage there and it's 1.5 or 2 feet off the ground, I can just go over in one step and I'm up there on that stage. But it's not like, okay, now I've handled that true story, untrue story, let me move on. I'm finding that there's still so many old beliefs so deeply ingrained in me. I still struggle with them. A few years back, I was down in Key West teaching a storytelling workshop, and I got an email from my coach, and he said that he was going to make a few changes when I got back in town, and he went on to say what he had planned to do. Well, I started crying And I cried for 3 days. Somehow I was able to keep teaching. But every time I even thought about that email, that emotion would well up and I'd start weeping. It wasn't until I got back to Asheville that I realized I was deeply afraid. Afraid if there were any changes, I might relapse to my old way of not being fit. You know, I think too that there are, let's see, the mic just keeps coming in and coming out. There it is. So I'm still working. Okay, let me do this sentence, okay? Nice. I wonder if it will happen again. I wanted to pause kind of right in here anyway, so that's perfect. You know, I'm also finding that there are a lot of other taboos that are wrapped up in this being physically fit. And one of them is aging. You know, the message we give is that once you start getting older, your bodies are going to start to deteriorate. Now, you might be able to eat some good food, exercise, walk a little bit, and, you know, you might be able to take this prescription or that. But the message is that as we get older, our bodies deteriorate, they start going downhill, and there is nothing you can do about it. The vast majority of Americans believe that story, and it's untrue. From my own experience, I know that there is this enormous potential and creativity as we age, as long as we're willing to question some of those taboos. I have to tell you and brag a little bit. Just recently, I was deadlifting 115 pounds, did eight of them in 60 seconds. I did 2 sets. So in 2 minutes, I had lifted 1,840 pounds, almost a ton. But along with this aging, there are other taboos that we can really question. You know, how often have we all heard someone say, "Oh, I'm just not very creative," or "I'm not good at relationships." Now, we're in a room full of creatives today. So the untrue stories you might be telling yourself about what you are not good at might be different. Maybe it's, "I just can't get organized," or "I'm not good at promoting myself, it feels weird." So there are a lot of untrue stories that we can really start to investigate, shine a light on them, and then decide if we want to shift some of those stories. That's really within us, that ability to shift. You might be, here's one other little area that a taboo can sometimes slip into. You might be really good at design, or maybe creating new code. Or maybe you're looking at something brand new that's never even existed before. There can be this little insidious voice, a whisper inside our brains going, "Well, you know you're good at this other thing, but you don't deserve to be good at all this too." We need to question those voices whenever they rise up. And I also want to say that, you know, this being physically fit is not something that got grafted onto me. This was always inside me, waiting for the right timing, waiting for this moment when it could come to life, waiting until I would question that story. Now, I want to say, too, that it's not like we don't die, that our bodies don't start changing a lot. You know, it's like a flower. There's a bud first, and then it blossoms. The colors get richer, and eventually it dies. And so does our bodies. So do our bodies. So do. But I do think that we limit ourselves and limit that possibility of doing something because, oh, I'm getting too old for that. Or I better watch this or watch that. Now, this is what I know for sure. I'm 70 years old and I'm in the best shape I've ever been in my whole life. I have muscles and I'm proud of those muscles. Anyone want to feel that? And I now have a new story. I am a physically fit woman. Thank you.